Эдриан, сейчас количество браков, где муж из одной страны, жена из другой стороны, все время растет, и количество, соответственно, разводов тоже увеличивается. Сейчас многие страны обращают внимание на ситуацию, когда необходимо защитить права ребенка и каким-то образом с помощью медиации разрешить вот эти конфликты между родителями, чтобы правильно обеспечить ребенку возможность адекватного роста и с учетом его контактов с обоими родителями. Какова роль вот этих вот кросс-культурных аспектов, как это учитывается в медиации?
This is a really important development in the postmodern world. We have a huge movement of peoples across borders, and it's what I would call almost binational mediation. Cross-cultural is naturally another term. And this is where parents at one end of the continuum may be considering that there is going to be a separation and that one of the parents may wish to move to another jurisdiction and perhaps take the children with them. In those situations, they're in a sense using a mediator to take us out. They're perhaps not in high conflict, they're just wondering what should they consider. And there's a whole range of considerations there through to where may the child reside, what sort of contact arrangements they think they can structure. Let's look at maybe any potential health issues, educational issues. What about the impact on those children of perhaps missing a set of grandparents or indeed the extended family per se? Moving along the continuum, we will have parents that are in conflict. And I think the role of the mediator there is to really help them consider and understand the implications that there may be for the child, keeping the child focused whilst recognising that this is possibly going to happen. But ideally, if it does happen, it is consensual with the parents. They have given it quite a bit of thought. Moving further on the continuum, of course, are those very, very difficult cases where a situation has arisen that there's been an abduction. And of course, we have regard to the Hague Convention and all those countries that may be signed up to that convention. For the mediator in those situations, they'd have to have a pretty good understanding of the legislation of the jurisdictions. And they'd have to be prepared to flag up where those clients may well need legal advice. But I think this is going to be a growing area. Now, the other thing that the mediator has to consider, particularly if the cultures are going to be fundamentally different, or indeed, say, the faiths within those cultures are going to be fundamentally different. For example, there may be someone from the Ukraine who has married someone, say, from an Asian country. And they have fundamentally different religions. The question I think we have to start asking ourselves is, does the mediator have to be an expert? That is, good grounding in understanding both of those cultures. Or should the mediator be what we call a curious explorer and be prepared to tease out from the parents an understanding which will help the mediator make sense of some of their differences? But I think it's a crucial area that we're going to see more and more of these cases. And of course, it's not just in marriages, it's also where people have lived together but not formalised the relationship. There's clear evidence that in many, many cases, mediators can do some absolutely fabulous work. But it also then starts raising other questions, such as who should the mediator be? For many, many parties, they're quite content to have a mediator working on the case. But there may be some situations where one of the parties might feel marginalised if they believe the mediator is from the country of origin of one of the parties and may, for example, not understand the culture of the other party. And it perhaps raises an issue of whether there's scope for there to be two mediators, one from each jurisdiction. But that can be incredibly expensive and quite difficult to arrange. But I think we're now on the cusp of seeing, and certainly the experiences in England and other jurisdictions, are that this is a growing area and it does need very, very careful consideration. We also have to consider where would be the appropriate place for the mediation. And in matters where there has already been an abduction, or it could also be termed as a kidnap, to what extent do matters need to be, any outstanding criminal matters, for instance, need to have been already dealt with, so that a finding of fact, or indeed a court outcome, has already been agreed. Sometimes it's very, very hard for mediators to work in cases and truly understand to what extent both participants are appropriately motivated to engage in discussions around the conflict. If, for instance, there are outstanding court proceedings against one party, the question is that party motivated truly to mediate, or are they only doing it to have some influence on a final court outcome? Many, many questions still perhaps to be explored and indeed answered in these binational situations. But from experience, and I have to say, I tend not to deal with the very tough cases. There are mediators that do feel sufficiently adept and skilled to do with kidnap and abduction cases. But in a great many cases, I think we can still operate as we normally would as family mediators, because the client's their conflict is not quite so positional or hardened.